And it seems to me that Mark Carney's strategy in particular was don't answer any questions, don't be too available, because it seems that Canadians, at least in the polling, were willing to project onto him what they wanted him. He's got a lot of credentials. Sounds like a smart guy. And so he didn't do a lot of major interviews. He did, like, I think, one interview with the national media, and that was Rosemary Barton on CBC. He completely he didn't take any questions from media in his last week of campaigning. So he was really campaigning in a very safe manner. And obviously that worked for him because he was able to get the majority of people who voted in the leadership race to vote for him.
Right. So let's talk about Mark Carney here. I have a lot of concerns about the way he won this Liberal race, and it's not because I don't support him as a person, but I think it belittles the democratic process in the way I appraise it. One, the media did disservice to Canadian, and the second is also that they tend to all be friends. I know Wikipedia says that Carney and Freeland have been friends since a very long time. Should that be priority over the leadership of 44 million people in the case of Carney, for instance?
Well, I mean, there's a lot to criticize the media. I think if it's true that the media was sort of nudging and hoping that it was going to be a Carney victory, well, they got that. The problem with that approach, with sort of having a coronation, is he hasn't been tested. He hasn't been properly tested, and he's not prepared to run a general election campaign. If he calls an election within the next couple weeks, which is highly likely, he's doing it based on the hope that the rest of Canada will basically take the same approach as the Liberals and not delve too carefully into his past or even to what his policies are. The problem with that approach is that he's not going to be competing amongst friends as he was with the Liberal Party. He's going to be competing amongst people that he has called out as being just like Trump or being a danger to Canada. So the gloves are off. And for him to be able to withstand the daily barrage of attacks, not just by the opposition parties, and it won't be just Pierre Poilievre, it'll also be the other opposition parties. And he'll also have to face the media. I think Canadians will demand that the media ask him some tough questions, such as, if you plan, as you said, to get rid of the carbon tax, what is your replacement for it? Because he said that there was going to be a replacement for it. He also said he was going to repeal the increase of the capital gains tax. Again, the question would be, well, the previous government that you advise, let's remember he advised them, went ahead with that. So I would ask him, if I were a journalist, did you give them that advice? What was your role in that capital gain? And why would the government want to do that? Well, they'd wanted to do that because they needed to raise some capital because they had a deficit crisis that's ballooning out of control. So then the next follow-up question would be, if you're not going to increase taxes, how are you going to pay for the existing operational budget that you claim is going to be balanced in 3 years, plus pay for these so-called new investments? I mean, those are some pretty fundamental questions that he can't really wiggle out of if he is going to run this as his platform in a general election campaign.
Right. So do you think Carney as a person stands a chance to renew the face of the Liberal Party right now in Canada? Because I think the party has been defaced by Trudeau since the last 10 years. Do you think he can really renew the face of the Liberal Party?
Well, it seems that he's their best hope. I mean, certainly, national public opinion polls suggest that he has a good chance at it. However, history tells a different story. I mean, we often get really excited by a new leader when they have this leadership race, but oftentimes the support that they get from that convention bounce tends to be dissipated by the time you get to election day. Even though elections are really short, only about 4 weeks, a lot happens in a campaign. So whatever benefit he had from the winning the leadership race is going to be pretty much gone. And again, he's running. We know this is a change election. So he's running on this idea that he is the agent of change. But yet everything he's done, and it's only been a day or two, suggests again to me that it's going to be more of the same. Look at who he's choosing to help run his office. He chose a former Trudeau cabinet minister, a cabinet minister that Justin Trudeau kicked out of his cabinet, Marco Mendicino, as his chief of staff. He's also chosen David Lametti, another Trudeau cabinet minister that got passed over for someone else, to help with that transition. Then you look at all the current cabinet ministers who endorsed him, so people like Stephen Guilbeault, who was all in on the carbon tax, is now saying, yes, I want you there. So I think that, if he really wants to show and demonstrate that he's an agent of change, it means his cabinet can't be the same people that were the cabinet under Justin Trudeau. They've got to be new people. Otherwise, what's different except that we've changed a guy with brown hair to a guy with gray hair and more credentials? But that's about the extent of the differences so far.
Right. So let's talk about his record as well, because one of the things they've touted in this liberal leadership race is his experience as a banker and who was led two major banks in the world. I don't know if you're familiar with his record in those two major offices that he held. How do you appraise that?
Well, for one, it's not a banker in the traditional sense of running a private bank, right? He was a bureaucrat. He was the governor of the Bank of Canada. And so what does that role do? It sets monetary policy. It actually doesn't set monetary policy. It acts on the basis of the policy that's been provided to them by the government of the day. So in his case, he was appointed by Stephen Harper, and they're using that a lot to their credit to say, hey, a conservative prime minister appointed you, and he said you did a great job. Clearly, he did. I mean, clearly, the government of the day did a great job because we were dealing with the financial crisis of 2008. But Stephen Harper pointed out, Mr. Carney is taking a lot of credit for things that he didn't have a direct hand in. All the heavy lifting was actually done by the finance manager, Jim Flaherty. He just was the bureaucratic arm that followed through on those decisions. So let's give him success for the 2008 crisis. Then he gets to be the governor of the Bank of England. And that is not such a great record. My understanding of it is that he also had to deal with the COVID. They also had to deal with inflation. And, Liz Truss, who was the very short lived prime minister in England, has nothing good to say about Mark Carney. She says he was not very helpful with them to help them manage the economy. And in fact, he left the post early. He didn't fulfill his time. So that's his sort of banker experience. Now, he's also worked at private equity firms, and it seems to be that his big focus has been, since leaving those two positions, has really been on the international front, looking at how to have a green transition, all in on climate action and things like that. But that is a lot of those positions, and it's hard to get a sense of what he actually did. He says he negotiated things, doesn't tell us specifically what he negotiated, but he claims that he was, involved in all these organizations, and that's the extent of it. But, a lot of those organizations want to transition to green economies, want to go to net zero, and some of his own investments. It's been alleged that while he was saying no to pipelines in Canada, he was saying yes to pipelines in other areas. And in fact, his investments were investing in coal activity rather than in Canadian clean energy. So there's some really concerning questions about his track record that he hasn't answered, and I think are great liability to him and the Liberal brand, especially as they profess to be so committed to climate change action.